Welcome to the world of tomorrow. Climb aboard. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future. Forget the world around you. Forget the people around you. You are entering Futurama, alone with your own thoughts.
These crises really, in a way, are symptoms of a process of transition to another form of civilization, another form of social, political, and economic and cultural organization. I think the urgent question that we need to be asking ourselves is what comes after? What is the post-carbon, post-peak world going to look like? And that is really up to us. It's pretty clear that we cannot continue growing on a single planet endlessly. What this means is that if we are going to overcome these crises, we need to rethink our whole understanding of the human condition and our relationship to our environment and our relationship to one another, and that we need to move away from some of these prevailing ideas and values that have dominated our current drive towards unlimited material growth, which is being driven by these consumerist values to do with the idea that human well-being is linked to increasing consumption of material products and increasing acquisition of material goods.
So do we need to ditch the whole concept of growth? Well, I do think that we need to reject the material concept of unlimited economic growth.
But we can still retain the idea of social progress, that there is some kind of moving forward, but we need to redefine what we mean by moving forwards, by getting better, by advancing. And rather than defining this in material terms, in terms of material production and consumption, we need to be defining it in terms of meeting people's basic needs, recognizing that any kind of material progress that we might make in and of itself means nothing if it doesn't cater for these more fundamental goals that all of us hold to be so important. Things like having clean water, education, literacy, things like spiritual fulfillment, things like community, family, things like well-being. There may be some material components to that, but what we find then is that the material conditions of life, rather than being the fundamental goal, rather those are simply tools to achieve these much more important values.
Jimmy. Don't be frightened. We are your friends.
We need to accept that the overabundance of fossil fuels has been linked to the ability to continue on this path of unlimited growth. There are many viable alternatives to fossil fuels. There is solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy. As we've discussed, scaling up this process of transitioning to renewable energy infrastructure wouldn't be feasible. So we need to be recognizing that there should be more localization, there needs to be much less consumption of natural resources, that we need to be lowering our footprint on the earth. Renewable energy alternatives do not allow us to continue business as usual. What they allow us to do is to contract our societies to a form which is much more sustainable and much more in parity with the environment and the earth.
Out of the slime and darkness it comes to inflict its life-destroying poison on the careless, the unwary, the unprotected. No sane person would deliberately expose himself to its venom. No intelligent person would venture within striking distance of its fangs. Yet today, young people are flirting with a poison every bit as deadly as that of the snake.
I think certainly the way forward for looking at the banks is, at a minimum, we want to see a fundamental separation of the activities of the financial sector, where banks are investing and speculating on stock markets and shares and so on and so forth, and we have this fictional financial whirlwind going on. Separate that out from basic retail banking, where a person goes to the bank, deposits their money for safekeeping, and goes away. They want to know that their money is their money, and that banks aren't going to be playing around with that and that it's going to be in jeopardy. That's one thing. On the other hand, we need to completely rethink the way money is created in the first place by banks. We need to accept that interest hasn't worked. It's actually generated and fundamentally created this whirlwind of unrepayable debt, which leads to cyclical economic failures. We need to be looking at the entire way that banks are structured and that money is created, and to start thinking about fundamental alternatives that communities can start engaging in now. What we're talking about is creating new forms of currency, new forms of exchange, and making them much more in parity with the real world. One of the most significant key structural problems is the fact that the vast majority of the world's population lives in a state of dispossession. By dispossession, I mean that they do not have access or ownership or use rights for land, resources, raw materials. This condition is one of the key causes that has generated a lot of the most regressive dynamics of capitalism in its current form. So it's essential that we challenge this condition of dispossession fundamentally. Communities are going to have access to land to produce food. If they don't, then they're not going to be able to eat, because supply chains are going to be damaged as a result of peak oil. Fossil fuels will not be providing food in the way that we were able to do so in the past. Industrial agriculture is failing. So in the post-peak world, we need to be exploring new forms of social organization that allow communities to open up access to land, to resources, to the commons.
And certainly we need to have a dialogue about how this happens. I'm not saying that I have a simple answer or a blueprint for the way forward, but this is something that needs to emerge organically from communities themselves.
Everybody cares about their community. To me, that's what transition is about.
It's real community investment, but it's locally owned. It's local people coming together and doing it.
If our vision is that we have communities that are thriving, where people feel included, but actually we need a culture that supports people into a state of well-being.
I feel proud of where I live at, and that's changed me.
It's been a very difficult process for us. Nobody should go into this with any kind of illusions about the amount of effort, the amount of commitment and the amount of time that it takes.
we wanted people to use the shop. What better way to get them to use the shop than to give them ownership of the shop?
And there you go, the Brixton Pound, electronic.
We are the first community-owned solar power station in Britain. That makes us feel pretty proud.
It's what society needs, what we all need, is to live in a safe world. And I think this is a start for it.
Say that time is money, but for a country where cash is now in short supply, time has taken on a whole different value.
In the Time Bank, we exchange voluntary services. Sometimes I give painting lessons for free, but I take yoga for free also. Somebody else is teaching yoga.
The Time Bank's just one of a growing number of service swapping alternatives that are providing people in Greece another way to cope with the tough economic conditions. Services can include anything from language classes to babysitting or home-cooked meals.
It's huge. It's huge. It's everything we do without money, like looking after people or making things by ourselves.
For a country in crisis, building social unity can prove extremely hard.
Crisis is a terrible thing. It creates fear. It divides people from public sector workers from private sector workers. It divides richer workers to poorer workers, immigrant workers from home workers, and that's a terrible thing.
But the barter networks have been a great way of bringing together large groups of people. A popular slogan here in Greece now is "No one's alone in the crisis." Organisations are arranging swap shops to exchange clothes, and one town in Greece has even started its own barter currency.
We still have the memory of agricultural society in Greece, where people used to do things together, like they would do the olive trees of my family this week, and then next week we'll do the olive trees of your family, and then the next week of the other neighbor. So they would exchange services, and they like that.
Nikki gives me and her friend Alexandra, who's also a member of the Time Bank, an art lesson. It's one of the free services she provides. And in exchange, Alexandra helps out with the gardening, and so the time is repaid.
It's an amazing way of receiving, finally, by giving to the others.
As many Greeks struggle with wage cuts, tax increases, and with unemployment in the country now cripplingly high, there's been huge interest in the time banks and barter networks. There's places in Aladdin's cave of arts and materials, and it's no wonder really that this idea of swapping goods and services has proven so popular. It's building solidarity at a time when the economic situation is extremely uncertain. Whilst these barter networks won't solve Greece's financial problems, they do provide a massive amount of support for the participants.
It's not a response to the economic crisis in the sense that it's going to overturn the government, but it's giving support and comfort to those who would like to overturn the terrible economic policies that are being imposed by the Troika. It's giving people support to feel that they can do something.
With the tough economic times leaving many Greeks feeling worthless, there is real value in projects like the Time Bank. And with the Greek government drowning in debt, these creative solutions are offering not only support, but encouragement to the people here, which at a time of deep recession are proving priceless commodities. Sarah Firth, RT, Athens.